Ngozi sank into the plush velvet sofa at their favorite cafe in Lekki Phase 1, her manicured fingers brushing against the gold trim of her designer purse. She wore confidence like perfume, visible, intoxicating, and just a little overwhelming. Her Ankara dress shimmered in the afternoon light, and the sparkle of her diamond ring caught every curious eye that passed. To her, it wasn't just jewelry, it was proof. Proof that she'd won the unspoken race for comfort, love, and admiration among her circle of women. Moments later, her friends, Tola, Kemi, and Amora, arrived, filling the air with laughter and the soft clink of glassware. Their meetings were never really about coffee, they were about comparison, whose husband was thriving, whose marriage was failing, and who was pretending best. Tola carried her success like a badge, Kemi hid her pain behind politeness, and Amora, ever so elegant, masked her sadness beneath layers of grace. But among them all, Ngozi felt untouchable, the queen of their quiet competition. When the conversation shifted, as it always did, to husbands, Ngozi's smile turned sly. While others complained or sighed, she boasted, casually but deliberately, about Chidi, her devoted husband. Her words danced between affection and pride, sometimes tipping into too much detail, enough to make her friends exchange glances. To Ngozi, it was harmless chatter, to them, it was revelation. And somewhere between laughter and envy, a seed was planted. Ngozi began her usual ritual with practiced ease, praising Chidi's newest achievement, a major construction contract that had elevated his name in Lagos business circles. Her words painted him as a man of brilliance and devotion, the kind every woman secretly prayed for. Tola sighed dramatically and called him the perfect Nigerian husband, while Kemi's smile, though polite, faltered slightly. Only Amora's silence stood out. She leaned in, resting her chin on her palm, eyes locked on Ngozi with a kind of quiet fascination that made the air feel heavier with every compliment spoken. The longer Ngozi talked, the more her confidence swelled. She loved being envied, it made her feel powerful, seen, untouchable. But Amora's undivided attention became fuel, it made her crave more of that admiration, more of that quiet awe. So she crossed an invisible line, choosing to share parts of her life she should have guarded. Her tone lowered, her voice softened into a conspiratorial whisper, and her words turned into delicate confessions. The conversation was no longer about business or success, it had become personal, intimate, dangerous. Ngozi felt a sudden, exhilarating urge to brag about something no one else could verify or replicate, the secret joy of her private life. She reasoned that these women were her closest allies, they deserved to know the full extent of her good fortune, perhaps so they could be motivated to demand more from their own men. She lowered her voice conspiratorially, the air immediately thickened with anticipation. This was the moment when the ordinary gossip morphed into scandalous truth. My dear friends, Ngozi purred, all of that is nice, but it's what he does when the lights are off that truly keeps me loyal, keeps me shining. Friends, you won't believe it. This man wants to kill me with enjoyment. Oh, I've never seen anything like it. His thing, I mean the real man in between his two legs, is just whale. It is really big. He make me moan and satisfies me on bed daily. His strength is like that of a horse and he has excess energy in bed. I don't know how God did it, but God did it well for me. Some things are just God-given. She winked, setting the stage for the intimate reveal that was to follow. It was an image that couldn't be unheard, a secret detail that only she and her husband should have ever been privy to. She had successfully made her marriage feel like a glorious public spectacle. Tola burst into raucous laughter, trying to lighten the suddenly heavy mood, declaring that Ngozi should write a handbook. Kemi, turning a deep shade of crimson, mumbled a quick excuse about needing to use the restroom, clearly needing a moment to compose herself after the sheer impropriety of the confidence. Amora, however, did not laugh, nor did she appear embarrassed. Her expression remained the same, but a dark, calculating glint briefly flashed in her eyes as she absorbed the shared secret. She simply smiled slowly, a secretive, almost predatory smile, and calmly replied, "Ngozi, you are truly blessed. I pray that kind of happiness lasts forever." That seemingly calm response from Amora masked a raging tempest of emotional pain and resentment within her. Her marriage to Uche, Ngozi's husband Chidi's business rival, was a hollow, childless arrangement sustained only by appearances and their joint family name. Uche was perpetually distant, critical, and, worst of all, emotionally absent. The contrast between Ngozi's boastful, vibrant intimate life and Amora's own cold, lifeless bedroom had become a source of profound, festering agony. Amora had been holding on to the belief that wealth and status were Ngozi's true obsession, but now she realized Ngozi possessed the one thing she craved most, a passionate, fulfilling connection with her husband. Ngozi's bragging felt like a personal attack, a cruel reminder of Amora's inadequacy as a wife and a woman. The specific, intimate detail Ngozi had shared about Chidi's masculinity became a fixed, haunting image in Amora's mind, representing everything she was missing and everything Ngozi was carelessly flaunting. The deep-seated envy Amora had been nursing for years, initially about cars and vacations, now centered solely on Chidi. She began to view him not as her friend's husband, but as a prize, a trophy that Ngozi did not deserve to parade so openly and carelessly. Amora's internal narrative twisted Ngozi's confidence into a grave insult. Driven by a toxic mix of emotional betrayal trauma from her own failing marriage and a blinding jealousy, Amora started formulating a treacherous plan. She realized that Ngozi had carelessly handed her the key to her downfall, a vulnerability disguised as a boast. Amora knew exactly where to strike to inflict the maximum, most personal pain. The opportunity for Amora to execute her plan presented itself unexpectedly but was instantly seized upon. Amora's extended family owned a large, dilapidated piece of land in the developing part of Ikeja, an area Chidi's firm had recently been commissioned to survey for redevelopment. Amora knew this was her chance to transition from a casual friend to a professional contact. Amora brought up the Ikeja property with a studied air of concern, framing it as a family crisis. She sighed dramatically, explaining that her elderly uncle was struggling to find an architect reliable enough to assess the land's true commercial potential and advise on a profitable sale. Ngozi, predictably, immediately jumped in, proudly volunteering Chidi's services. "Chidi is the best, my dear. He can handle anything. He'll give your family the straight truth," Ngozi insisted, unknowingly pushing her husband directly into the path of Amora's trap. Chidi, being a courteous man, politely agreed to take a look at the site plans as a favor. Amora accepted the offer with deep gratitude, making sure to exchange professional contact details with Chidi directly, sidestepping Ngozi with a casual joke about keeping the wives out of the technical stuff. This small act established a plausible, private line of communication, one that Ngozi would never suspect. The seed was planted successfully. Amara now had a legitimate, non-social reason to request Chidi's time, meet him privately, and engage him in a way that would appeal directly to his professional ego and, eventually, his more base instincts. The road to betrayal had been paved by Ngozi's own overconfidence. Chidi arrived and was expecting professional discussion. But Amara was waiting, standing in the filtered light like a vision that defied the industrial setting. She wore a dress of rich, shimmering emerald green silk, cut to embrace her figure, with a deep cowl neckline and a daring slit up one thigh. The dress was a deliberate, sensual statement meant only for his eyes. Her hair was down, falling in soft, voluminous waves, and a subtle, intoxicating musky perfume, completely unlike Ngozi's bold florals, reached him before she even spoke. "Chidi, darling," she purred, her voice a low, throaty murmur that instantly bypassed his professional defenses. She moved towards him, not with the briskness of a client, but with the slow, languid grace of a lover. "Thank you for coming. These documents, they truly confound me." She didn't bother pointing to the plans. Her eyes, dark and luminous, were fixed on his. "You have such a brilliant, powerful mind, Chidi. So focused, so capable." Her hand, with its perfectly manicured nails, didn't just drift to his arm, it rested there, her palm warm against his suit, a feather-light touch that sent a clear, jolting signal. "Not like Uche," she sighed, letting a profound sadness enter her eyes. "He barely notices when I'm in the room. He never truly sees me, Chidi. But you," she leaned closer, her warm breath ghosting his ear, "you see everything. You see the potential. You see the person." She stepped back just enough to look up at him, her gaze intense. "Tell me, my love, does Ngozi ever truly appreciate the depth of your intensity, the fire that drives you?" She stepped impossibly closer, her hands lifting to lightly cup his face, her thumbs gently stroking the skin near his temples. "You carry so much, Chidi," she whispered, her voice laced with adoration, "so much responsibility, so much glorious masculinity." Her fingers began a slow, deliberate journey down the front of his jacket, lingering at his collar, then gently opening the lapels and resting her palms flat against his chest, right over his beating heart. "A man like you, you deserve to be adored. To be felt. To be worshipped." The air thickened, suffocating with unspoken desire. Chidi, mesmerized by the intoxicating combination of her seductive touch and so deep flattery, found himself utterly unable to pull away. Amara closed the final gap, her head tilting back slowly, her luminous eyes conveying a silent, desperate confession of passion. "I feel such a connection with you, Chidi," she confessed, and then, without another word, her lips were on his. The kiss was everything Chidi had been craving, urgent, desperate, and consuming, a release of weeks of tension and illicit longing. Amara responded with a passionate, intoxicating intensity that thrilled and shocked him. Her hands locked around his neck, pulling him down into the kiss, sealing the betrayal. Chidi's clipboard finally clattered, forgotten, to the dusty floor. In that, the intimacy that began in the dust of the construction site quickly morphed into an intoxicating, reckless routine. The raw, half-finished building remained their primary haven, a silent, concrete witness to their betrayal. Amora ensured every meeting was a feast for Chidi's eyes and ego. She'd arrive wearing seemingly modest, high-neck tailored dresses in luxurious fabrics, only to shed them in their secluded alcove, revealing slinky satin chemises or barely their lace underthings designed to highlight the glorious masculinity she claimed to worship. Their stolen moments weren't confined to Ikeja, however. Driven by an escalating desire and a need for greater comfort, they branched out. Discreet boutique hotels in Victoria Island became their clandestine havens, providing soft beds and anonymity. These were their safe hours, brief, intense escapes where Chidi forgot his titles and his wife, drowning instead in Amora's absolute, unwavering devotion. In the hushed rooms, Amora would cling to him, whispering every adoring word he craved. "You are everything, Chidi. You are the man every woman dreams of, the man Ngozi never truly saw," she would purr, twisting Ngozi's confidence into a dagger aimed at his loyalty. Chidi, fully addicted to the intoxicating contrast between his public life and his private rebellion, found himself prioritizing these stolen hours. His professional zeal was now entirely fueled by Amora's presence. Every late-night text, every secret glance, and every passionate reunion on the floor of his construction project or in a hotel suite cemented Amora's place as his emotional anchor. He had transitioned from a man who resisted temptation to a man completely dependent on the thrill and validation Amora provided, carelessly paving the road to his own ruin. Ngozi, initially oblivious due to her deep-seated pride, began to sense a shift in the atmosphere of her perfect life. It started subtly, a faint, musky scent of a perfume that was decidedly not hers clinging to Chidi's shirt when he returned late. His late-night calls were now always abruptly ended, followed by a distant defensiveness she had never encountered before. The most damning clue, however, was the site itself. Chidi was obsessively busy with Amora's family land, always needing to be there in the late evenings. Ngozi's mind, accustomed to cataloging assets and rivals, finally made the connection. Her husband, the brilliant man she openly boasted about, was spending an excessive amount of private time with her elegant, quiet friend, Amora, whose only known husband was cold and emotionally absent. The jealousy Ngozi had always sought to inspire in others, the silent envy of her perfect marriage, now turned inward, transforming into a corrosive suspicion. It wasn't just about Amora or Chidi, it was about the public humiliation of having her most extravagant boast rendered a pathetic lie. Her husband, her prize, was being shared. One evening, unable to bear the gnawing doubt, Ngozi lied about a women's meeting and directed her driver toward the Ikeja site. It was dark, save for a few harsh utility lamps. She dismissed the driver and, ignoring the dust and the rough terrain in her expensive sandals, located Chidi's sleek black SUV parked discreetly around the back. Her heart pounding, Ngozi crept into the unfinished shell of the building. She followed the sound of low voices and soft laughter, moving towards the shielded alcove that Amora had turned into their private sanctuary. When she reached the corner of the wall, she stopped dead, a gasp catching in her throat, a sound swallowed by the vast, empty space. There, bathed in the faint, single light of a small work lamp, were Chidi and Amora. Amora was draped over Chidi, both half-dressed, their lovemaking having just paused. The single, guttural sound that escaped Ngozi's throat was not a scream, it was the silent collapse of her entire world. Her boastful confidence, the carefully constructed facade of her perfect marriage, and her very identity as the queen of her social circle shattered upon the dusty, cold concrete floor. She stood motionless, a magnificent figure of high fashion momentarily paralyzed by the crushing reality. Chidi, seeing his wife, not the public spectacle Ngozi, but the raw, wounded woman, jerked away from Amora as if burned. Shame, raw and debilitating, swept over him. The arrogance that Amora had so skillfully fueled evaporated instantly, leaving behind the terror of a man caught in the most catastrophic lie. He tried to speak, mumbling Ngozi's name, scrambling for a piece of cloth to cover himself, but no coherent sound escaped. Amora, however, did not move. Her predatory smile remained fixed, unrepentant, a clear confirmation that this was not a mistake, it was the successful execution of a plan. She turned her back on the pathetic scene, the half-dressed husband, the gloating friend, the dusty canvas bed, with a dignity far greater than any of her previous boasts. Her expensive sandals crunched softly on the loose gravel as she walked away, leaving them alone in the monument to their infidelity. She did not need to say a word, the separation, the end, was already sealed in that terrible silence. She simply drove away, leaving Chidi to face the consequences of the pleasure he had just chosen over his entire life. The scandal that erupted in Lekki was swift and brutal. The same social circle that had fueled Ngozi's competitive boast now ravenously consumed the story of her downfall. Ngozi acted with cold, decisive efficiency. She filed for divorce immediately, citing adultery and emotional cruelty, and ensured the settlement included a significant financial penalty against Chidi, targeting the very wealth he had used as a pedestal. Her diamond ring, once proof of her status, was packed away, replaced by a fierce new determination to define herself outside of her husband's success. Chidi's career, dependent on reputation and high-level social trust, fractured under the pressure. The Ekeje construction deal, Amora's family property, was immediately revoked due to the conflict of interest and professional misconduct. He lost face, lost the contract, and was financially devastated by the divorce settlement. The man Ngozi had publicly described as a god among men was revealed to be a mere man, flawed, weak, and now professionally humiliated. He was publicly shamed, forced to move out of their matrimonial home, losing the result of the genius Amora claimed Ngozi never appreciated. Amora achieved her goal, Ngozi's pride was shattered. But the victory was hollow. Chidi, stripped of his wealth and arrogance, was no longer the glittering prize she once desired. The fire that had fueled their affair faded quickly in the cold shadow of scandal. Returning to her husband, Uche, Amora expected forgiveness, or at least familiarity. Instead, she found only deceit. Uche had long discovered her betrayal and, in silence, crafted his own revenge. Within weeks, he filed for divorce, leaving her name and fortune in ruin. In the end, Amora stood alone, disgraced and childless, her triumph turned to ash. She had destroyed Ngozi's world only to watch her own collapse in the same way, haunted forever by the memory of the predatory smile she once wore when she believed she'd won. Ngozi, scarred but free, shed the shackles of social comparison. She started a new business. The boast that had started it all, a careless confession about her husband's prowess, had inflicted the deepest wound, but ultimately became the catalyst for her own, hard-won independence.